Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the CASAS National News and Updates webinar on remote testing. We'll be getting started in just a moment. Thank you all for joining us. We're very glad you're here. We're going to be getting started just in a couple minutes. We'll go over a few housekeeping things as far as using Zoom. So please, everyone, come in, get comfortable, have a seat, and we'll be with you in just a couple minutes. We still have a number of people joining the Zoom webinar, and we're going to be going over a few of the details. You do not need to type in the chat box right now. We're just going to go over the details. So first off, as you join us, whether you're on your phone or your computer, we ask you to make sure that they're muted. It's a large webinar today. We have a lot of attendees, so we're going to try to keep everything moving as quickly as possible. We have a recording of the webinar we'll do, which we'll post along with a copy of the PowerPoint. Now, if you'd like to download a copy of the PowerPoint now before we get started, that might be a good idea. The bottom bullet says it's posted. If you go to CASAS.org and over on the left side under What's New, if you go down to the fourth bullet point link, which is called News and Updates Webinars. Again, download a copy of the PowerPoint on CASAS.org under What's New, under the News and Updates webinar. And you can have a copy of it and follow along whether you're on a phone or a computer. So due to the large attendance today, CASAS staff will respond to as many questions as possible. We're gonna ask that you hold off a little bit. We believe that a lot of things will be answered in the sequence of the slides. Okay, next slide, please. Welcome, everyone. We're going to get started first with a few tips. Obviously, we all know how to use Zoom, but today we're in a special version of Zoom for a large number of attendees. It's called a Zoom webinar. You'll notice down at the bottom, there's an additional button called Q&A, which does not exist with a Zoom meeting. The Q&A button and the chat button are used for two different things. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, now your audio settings are controlled by you. If you can't hear, down under audio settings, you can adjust things like your internal speakers or your headset so that you can turn it on. If you have a problem with that, you can go ahead and put a note in the webinar chat box. Now, if it's a volume issue, like too loud or not loud enough, you can use the volume on your computer to adjust whether it's, if you want it louder or softer. Next slide, please. And we're just getting started here. So the chat box for this Zoom webinar meeting will be used for things if you want to communicate a technical problem. You don't need to sign in with your name. We're not going to be taking attendance today. There's just too many people for that. You'll notice that when you're marking a remark to the chat, who are you chatting with? Under the two, you can select all panelists, and the panelists would be the CASAS hosts and co-hosts, or you can select everyone if you wish to make a comment that's shared with the entire audience. Next slide, please. This is the good one. In the Q&A box, questions related to the presentation, if you want to know more about training or you have a question about Chromebooks, you would put that in the Q&A box. And we have a team that are going to be looking at your questions and answering them just as quickly as possible. Afterwards, we'll go back and post a copy of the Q&A on CASAS.org so that you can review all the questions and answers. Next slide, please. So if you're just joining us, welcome. Here's kind of a recap. We're going to be getting started in just 1 minute. Make sure your phones and computers are muted. Save your questions for the Q&A box, not the chat box. And if you wish to download a copy of the recording, that will be posted soon. The PowerPoint is posted right now on CASAS.org under the What's New section under News and Updates webinar. And I'm watching the number of participants and it's starting to stabilize. So I think we're about ready to get started. Next slide, please. It's my pleasure to introduce today Pat Rickard, who is the president of CASAS. Thanks, Pat.
Good morning, everyone. We have quite a crowd that has joined us today. We are really excited to share with you what we have learned from the pilot sites in the 15 states that have been implementing CASAS pre and post testing, and also how we can move forward together with remote testing now and in the future. We are grateful to the pilot sites that step forward to help with a variety of approaches to remote testing while maintaining the security and integrity of the assessment. We are also grateful for the state agency staff who have worked with us to ensure that the remote testing policies are viable within their states and will maintain the high quality, integrity, and security of the remote testing in their states. Remote testing is the wave of the future. We are prepared to support you and your agency as you develop the capacity to test distant learners and participants and make remote testing a regular and essential part of your program. We are at the beginning of this journey, not the end. So we hope you'll come along with us for the ride. And with that, I'll turn it over to Linda Taylor, who is our Vice President. And Linda, please share with them what we've learned along the way.
Thanks, Pat. Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're, as Pat said, so excited to share this with you and excited that so many of you are interested in learning about it from us. Here's the agenda for today's webinar. I want to make it clear from the very beginning that this is an informational webinar. It is not a proctor training webinar. And at the end of the session, we're going to share with you all of the many, many resources we have developed that do give very detailed instructions for proctors. But today, we are going to provide an overview of remote testing as CASAS is implementing it. And we're going to talk about some of the ways that you can implement. There's different approaches. We have a going remote checklist, like our eTest going live checklist, but this time for going remote. And we'll talk about next steps and show you where to find all the resources on the website. With so many people here today, we hope that you will listen, even possibly through to the end. I'll be pausing every so often and to see if there are any urgent questions or things that we think might be of value to the whole group. But with so many people, it would probably be useful if you can hold your questions and just see if they're going to be answered. And then if you see that we're moving along and they're not answered, then please do go ahead and ask them, as Janice said, in the Q&A box and not in the chat box. All right. So let's first talk about the overview. And we wanted to start with the U.S. Department of Education's guidance, OCTAE, that is our own Office of Career, Technical, and Adult Education that governs adult ed. On April 17th, they put out a memo in which they said that they are allowing and testing flexibility to the states. They have said that they allow programs to exempt students that are enrolled in distance education now during this COVID-19 pandemic, exempt them from pre and post testing because it would be so challenging, they understand, to test all of your students as you had promised. So they have given quite a lot of, this word flexibility I think is extremely important. That really from the highest authority, they're saying there's flexibility and you are not required to test. Now your own states are coming up with their own policies for this unusual time. And you of course need to follow the guidelines in your state. Another thing that OCTAE is requesting is for states and therefore local programs to specify the time frame for these exemptions and then identify students who you're exempting. So that's something that they are asking local states and local programs to do so that they can be accountable and have some way to explain what happened during this period of time. Another thing that OCTAE published on March 27th was that with remote testing, it's extremely important to follow the NRS, follow the test publisher's guidelines for NRS approved tests. And specifically in these three areas: student identification, that is authenticating the student's ID; test security, which is very important, not just for us, as I'm sure you realize it is, but also for you, because if these very precious NRS approved tests get compromised, that is a threat to all of us. And then remote proctor training, because they understand that proctors are going to need additional training and guidance in order to be able to do remote testing. So in response to this, CASAS has added a field in our software, TOPS Pro Enterprise, called Unable to Test Due to Force Majeure. So this is a way for you to document the students that you are unable to test, that you're exempting. And we released that a few weeks ago. It is something that if you're going to use it, you should wait for guidance from your state before completing this field, because they may have specific ways they want you to do it, but please do take advantage of this if you'd like to. Now, we know that there are a number of ways that testing can happen during this time. And so we wanted to lay out a few possible assessment scenarios during and after the pandemic. And as Pat says, we really are thinking this is not just for now, although of course it's of great interest for now to do remote testing. But afterwards, we really hope that you will find a lot of interesting and useful ways to apply remote testing in your programs. And we'll be talking about that as we go. So one possible scenario is and this is if you, by some chance, have access to your physical test center, to invite students to come in by appointment and set it up so that they can practice, and you of course also as a proctor can practice social distancing. We know this is happening in some programs. Perhaps it will start to happen more as the country opens up. But of course, doing face-to-face testing is certainly an option and something that you all already know how to do well. So if that becomes possible, we of course want to encourage you to do that. Another possibility is that perhaps only the proctor goes into the test center, the physical test center, and then has access to that technology, and then is able to test students remotely from their homes or wherever they may be. So that could be a way that, in case, as I go through later, I'm going to explain about some of the technology required for the proctor, that may, if it's possible for the proctor to go into the center, may be a way for you to manage that. And then thirdly, we'll be focusing mostly on this scenario where the proctor is remote and the test takers are remote. So that, of course, is what's happening probably most of the time out there right now. So as I mentioned, each state is to decide, this is what Octave has asked each of them to decide if they're going to allow or not allow remote testing for the NRS tests. And so when and if your state decides to do this, they will inform you. And then please, we ask you to confirm with your state office if you are permitted. Just make sure, because we will stay as up to date as we can. We've reached out to the states and asked them to please inform us of their intentions. But if something changes and we're not aware of it, we ask you to please find out and make sure that you can do this and that it's permitted. Just to give you a little bit of what happened in terms of Octave's subsequent actions, on April 9th, they met with the test publishers, that is all the test publishers, including CASAS. And then following that, CASAS had a meeting, just CASAS, with Octave, and we presented our plan for remote testing. And after they heard it, they did give us permission to roll out remote testing. And actually, they were quite impressed with our plan and our timeline. On April 20th, CASAS conducted a webinar for state directors and their staff, and that was to begin to share our plans and to let us know where we were headed. So let's talk now about some of the benefits of remote testing. One clearly is to provide some level of continuation of services. We know that you're not going to be able to test 25 students at a time with remote testing, but there is an opportunity to post-test some students, and you can decide who. If you might set some priorities for who you think, who among your students are the best ones to select for this purpose, so that you can achieve some MSGs. Again, if you remember what Octave has advised, that there's flexibility, so you're not required, as far as we understand, to test everyone. You can pre-test new students, and we know with unemployment rates being high, that's typically when our adult learners come to us, and we are getting a lot of interest. So I know you're serving them with a lot of innovations with distance learning, and would like to get a baseline score for NRS reporting if you possibly can. You would also, I'm sure, like to get some guidance to place them into the distance learning materials that you're using. And another purpose of pre-testing is that we have many workforce training programs out there and one-stops that use our tests to determine eligibility for training. So these are some of the ways that you might benefit from implementing remote testing now. We're very much wanting to promote as well that by adding remote testing now, and even if it's in a limited capacity, just trying it out, it's a way that you will be able to add flexibility into your assessment offerings by developing that capacity to offer multiple testing options, including those to your distance learners, who until now we've been able to instruct, but not to assess. So we want you to think about how you can make remote testing a regular part of your program and ride this wave of remote testing that we're quite sure is going to take us all into the future with a lot of interesting opportunities for how to expand our offerings to adult learners. Now, I know that you all can probably rattle off all these challenges as well as I can, and we are acutely aware that there are many challenges involved in remote testing. One of them, of course, is the access to technology, which is, I think you've all seen that it's accentuating the digital divide, making it more obvious who has the technology needed to access learning and testing. That's in terms of the devices available to our students. And, you know, as much as we would love to offer our NRS approved tests on smartphones, they're simply too small to show the test questions. And I hope you can understand that that would be a great disadvantage to a student who was trying to take one of our tests on a smartphone. They would not be able to do well because they would not be able to read the whole test prompt, the reading passage or math question or diagram. So it's just not possible at this point. You know, this is something we can certainly strive to make available in the future. We know that most of our students have smartphones, and that's the most available technology, but it's simply not possible at this point to allow that. Internet bandwidth can also be a challenge because our students are at home where there may be other people in their household who are also using that internet bandwidth. They may be working from home, they may be kids or others doing distance learning. There are so many ways. Someone could be downloading a movie. So there are all different ways that that bandwidth can be pulled upon. And so that's something that you're going to need to check when you do remote testing. The student environment, it's not the pristine test center. It's the student's own environment where they may not be able to have privacy. There may be a lot of noise and distractions. So when we've done our piloting, there have been some programs who reached out to students and found that some of the students that they thought they might involve in the pilots were not able to assure that they would have a private place to do the testing. So this is a consideration. It's unfortunate, but it's unavoidable. So it's something that needs to be considered when you decide who you can test. There are new procedures to learn. There are processes and procedures, but one of the things that we have taken great care to do, and it's one of the reasons we took a little bit longer to roll out our remote testing, is that we've created very detailed, scripted, step-by-step guidelines. And we have heard from our pilot sites that that is helping them to do this. So it's a challenge, but with the supports that we're offering, we hope to make it easier for you. Proctor training is recommended, and but highly recommended, but it is optional. But it is something that your proctors are going to need to learn how to do this because it's not the same as, of course, as face-to-face testing. Test security is, of course, a challenge, and it's uppermost in our minds, and I would recommend that it be also uppermost in yours, because we all need these tests to stay secure and have a long life. Equity concerns, they do come in, whether it's in terms of the technology, in terms of the environment, or any other aspect. So these are things that I'm sure you've all been attending to as you've been implementing distance learning. So as this became a clear need, we reached out to some third-party vendors. There are many of them. We also looked at some artificial intelligence solutions. Some of them are asynchronous, where the testing occurs and afterwards you review to see if anything inappropriate took place. We looked at some different web conferencing platforms to see which ones worked and how they worked differently. We reached out to state directors and their staff. We talked to a lot of you and tried to learn from your experience with distance learning. We weighed multiple factors as we tried to come up with our approach. The technology constraints, test security, ease of implementation, and of course, all of your eagerness to get started quickly. We know too, and always in adult ed, we have cost considerations because we have limited budgets. And so one of the early decisions was that we would choose a delivery mode that's more affordable. That is where we use your own agency proctors and an affordable or free web conferencing platform, and not, for the time being, a third-party solution, because these solutions can be pricey. On average, about $15 to $20 per test taker. So that is really more than most programs can handle. And we will still keep looking into that. If we can find any solutions that are reasonable, we would certainly entertain them. But for now, we are sticking with the use of your proctors and an affordable web conferencing platform that you choose. In terms of access to and the cost of the technology, we are offering several approaches. And in that mix of approaches, we are using some devices that students already may have, not their smartphones, unfortunately, as I said, but other ones that they do commonly have. And then in terms of staffing costs, this is one thing where we are quite aware that they are going to be higher than they are normally when you have one proctor testing 25 students at a time. But with remote testing, in order to have a good look at what the student is doing, and that is to preserve and maintain the test security, we have to have a limit on the number of test takers at a time. So it's just not possible to test large numbers and still maintain test security. So we acknowledge there are some high staffing costs, and that's something that hopefully you will get some help with. So how we're maintaining this test security is by requiring live proctoring. That it has to happen. You have to proctor while giving the test. The whole time the proctor has to be there and be able to see the student. We have what we're calling remote testing agreements for agencies, one per agency, proctors, and also students, because in this remote testing mode, they also have to agree to abide by the rules to do with test security and other things. Normally in a test center, we don't have to ask them to do that, but here we do. So you're going to be using certified, that is already certified e-test proctors with some additional training for remote testing. We are not asking you to record the test session. In fact, we are not allowing you to record the test session because we felt that that would possibly be both that there are privacy issues to that and as well as test security. So we are asking you to please not record the session. This should be fairly obvious, this next bullet, but I will say it, that you can only do remote testing on e-tests and not on paper tests. And finally, if you are not conducting remote testing following our procedures, then you must have a face-to-face situation where the proctor is physically present, as always, to give the test. So which tests are possible to do remotely? Our multiple choice that are approved for NRS are all possible. That would be our reading and math goals for ABE and ASE, the life and work reading for ESL, the life and work listening 980 for ESL. For California EL Civics, there is a multiple choice test called the Government and History for Citizenship test that is not used for pre and post testing, but just for EL Civics. And as far as I know, mostly or perhaps only in California. Now, there may eventually be other tests that you'd like to use. And if there are, you can certainly reach out and ask us if that would be possible. There are other tests also that are possible for EL Civics in California, and they have their own guidelines and training. So let me tell you about the phases that we've rolled this out in. The first one started April 20th, and that's where we had clinical tryouts and our initial pilots. We started with Zoom and just one proctor, one student, or one test taker. We thought that that would be easiest to manage to begin with, and there was a lot of familiarity with Zoom, and we thought that just one-on-one would certainly be easier to tackle to begin with. Then, and initially we limited it to the reading and math goals as well as the reading for ESL. Then, a little over a week ago, we entered our phase 2, where we do continue to pilot because we are rolling out different approaches, and we actually do strongly recommend that within your programs you start small, that you do an agency level pilot. We've done, during this time, we've been doing state pilots, so we've been interacting, we've invited, we asked our state contacts to recommend 1, 2, or 3 programs to pilot, and we've learned a lot from them. And then they are rolling out, but it's up to you. If you are ready to roll out, if you read, and I'll be telling you all the resources, you can roll out, it's possible to roll out these different approaches. So one is one-on-one, one proctor, one test taker with what we call remote control, where the proctor has remote control of the student's screen. That can be done with Zoom and with, not all, but some other platforms. So you need to check and make sure that if you're going to use another platform, which you can do, that you make sure that it has this ability to give remote control. A second type of approach that you can pilot and or roll out is proctoring with multiple test takers. That is, currently our limit is up to 5. And that can be done with Windows 10 or with Chromebooks right now. And then we've added life and work listening in this phase 2. So in phase 3, we just do want to let you know that we are just, I think, at the tip of the iceberg in terms of exploring options. And we wanted to get together some options that we knew you could start with. But if there are some additional opportunities and ideas that we can implement, we are very much open to those and are continuing and to continuously exploring what may also be possible. So if you would like to recommend some options to us that you're aware of that you think could work, we are very open to trying them out with you. And we also are continuing to explore other ways to do this. Before I get into going a little more detail with these approaches, let me just pause for a second and ask if there are any questions that would be important to answer at this point.
There's one request, Linda, if possible, to enlarge the screen, the PowerPoint screen, if that is something you could do from a technology.
I don't think so. I have it in slideshow mode.
Got it. Okay, and then there were a few questions regarding the process for training, and you're going to cover that in later slides, correct?
Yes, I am.
Very good.
All right, let's carry on.
Yes.
So we have 3 approaches to remote testing. The first one I was describing a little bit before, it's called one-to-one remote control. The second one is called one-to-one or multiple test takers with the test takers using Windows 10 PCs. And the third one is one-to-one or multiple test takers with the test takers using Chromebooks. So each approach, as I mentioned, has very detailed but clear, step-by-step scripted instructions. These are called CASAS remote testing guidelines. And there is a separate guidelines document for each approach and a proctor training for each approach. And also for each approach, there are different and detailed technical requirements for both the proctors and the test takers. So please be aware that if you, let's say you decide to do the one-on-one remote control approach, you'll have to read the remote testing guidelines for that approach. In all of these guidelines, we used Zoom as an example because we know that Zoom is something that many people are familiar with. But it does not mean that Zoom is the only platform that you can use. It's just an example that gives a little bit more helpful information so you can relate better to what we're explaining. This is just to let you see that there is a document for each of these. It looks like this, more or less. And you can see that the current version of the one-to-one remote control guidelines is version 2.0. So that's the one that's posted on the website. And please do, we'll keep you posted. I'm going to show you where we keep updating, but we will be, I'm sure, adding new versions as we keep updating these based on comments that we get. So in this one-to-one remote control approach, in this context, the test takers have a variety of devices that they can use. Of course, they can use PCs. Excuse me, they can use iPads. So we hope that is helpful. If your program is able to give them iPads, or if they have iPads, they can use an iPad or they can use a Mac. The proctor, though, has to have a Windows 10 computer that is registered for testing and has to be able to remotely share their screen with the test taker, because the proctor starts the test, that is e-tests, on their computer, then gives remote control to the student, where the test taker enters their response on their own device, and the proctor watches via the web conferencing platform that you're using a webcam. For all of these approaches, you need a reliable internet connection of 2 Mbps or faster. So one of the advantages of this approach is that it allows for a variety of devices for the test taker. You can use any web conferencing platform, which is actually true, well, not exactly actually for all the approaches, but you can use any platform that does allow remote control in addition to screen sharing. So just to be clear, screen sharing is one thing, but remote control is an additional feature. And this approach is relatively easy to implement for both the proctor and the test taker. Again, it's one-on-one. All right, now this is what it looks like on the proctor's screen doing a practice test. And this is what the student also would see on their computer, but the proctor would see this, the test being given, as well as the video of the student showing on their screen. In the second approach, it can be one-to-one, or it can be with multiple test takers. The test taker needs a PC with Windows 10. So we are quite aware that most of our test takers do not have this, but it is possible. And so we wanted to let you know that this is possible. The test taker must register their computer for e-testing. And I want to let you know that with the implementation of remote testing, we have allowed that only one person, that is the proctor, can register the student's computer. We took away the requirement for 2 people to register a computer. So that will expedite this process. Again, here the student enters their responses on their own computer. The proctor monitors with up to 5 test takers using any web conferencing platform that you have in common with the students. And again, you need that level of internet speed. The way this works is, and there may be variations on this theme, we already have had some with our pilot sites, but in essence, the proctor puts the test takers in private breakout rooms. Some of the applications, these platforms call this a private room, some of them call it a breakout room. That's what it's called in Zoom. And that is where the student actually takes the test in that private room. The proctor circulates to these rooms to monitor. So that is one disadvantage of this approach, but it is, the students will not know when the proctor is going to pop in. Could be any time, but the proctor needs to go around to the different rooms. And of course, before, you can have the test takers all in the main room to give them all instructions as needed. At any point in the process, the test taker can ask for assistance, whether in the main room or in the breakout rooms. And you can, in some of our pilots, they're trying solutions with more than one proctor, say 2 proctors and 5 students. So then the proctor can circulate, the 2 proctors could do more circulation. Another possibility is to include a person called a moderator, who could be the one who checks the student IDs or helps to manage the process. So there's various ways that you can adapt all this and be creative with how to implement this. There, you know, as we know that you already do with your e-testing implementations, that a lot of you have setups that work for your program. And so similarly with remote testing, we want you to figure out ways that will work for you, but still following the basic guidelines for test security and some of the procedures that are not open for adaptation. Now, the third option is with Chromebooks. I should say that this one is not available today, but by the end of this week, we will be posting the guidelines for the Chromebooks approach, and then you would be able to use it. In this solution, the test taker uses Chromebooks. So it could be one test taker, could be up to 5. The proctor monitors with the web conferencing platform. And what's different about another thing that's different about this approach is that the proctor and the students do need to use their mobile phones, because it's not possible on Chromebooks to have 2 applications running at the same time. So the test takers will be registering their computers and running e-tests on their Chromebook. In some of these, I'll explain a little bit more. That can be, there's 2 options for this, but it's necessary for the observation, the monitoring of the proctor to the students to take place on mobile phones that are held that are positioned to the side so that the phone is showing the proctor's, the test taker's screen and their keyboard and their hands. So actually it really does give a better view of what's going on with the test taker. And it's the only way that this all can happen with the Chromebook. So it's a little bit unwieldy, but still doable. And so again, here you need a decent internet speed. So there are 2 options with Chromebooks. The first one is with 1 or more test takers. The test taker has to register their computer with e-testing. And one of the requirements that Chromebook has to do this is that it must be in what's called kiosk mode. So I'm not going to go into the details of that. It's something that if you all have been using Chromebooks already for e-testing, that you're already familiar with this. And if the situation is that your agency has provided students with Chromebooks and you have a control of them, then you may be able to remotely set up kiosk mode for them. If not, you'll need to go through some procedures to set that up. So it's something you'll need to look into. It's something that we cannot get around. It's the only way that e-tests can work on a Chromebook. So, and tech support will be able to help you with that. We've already been working with programs on this for e-tests, so we can give you some guidance on that. Here again, the test responses are entered by the test taker on the Chromebook. The proctor monitors with the mobile phone, and you can use any web conferencing platform. Now the second option is sort of, I would say, brilliant in its simplicity, and it's how you can use Chromebooks. The student has a Chromebook. The proctor has to have a Windows 10 computer, though, in this scenario, and but the student can use their Chromebook, and the proctor would share their screen with the test taker on the Chromebook, and the proctor would go through the test while the student would say aloud their answers as they go. So it'll be number 1, the answer is A, or the answer is, and they would say the answer. So the proctor would be moving through the test, and the student would be orally telling the proctor the answer that they think is correct. So this is one way to go about it if your students have Chromebooks and you want to take advantage of that. Again, the test taker needs to have their mobile phone set up to be able to see what they're doing. But this approach is easy, should be easy to implement, and it does give you the ability to test students with Chromebooks. As I mentioned, we have something called an agency remote testing agreement. And One of the requirements is that your agency must already be set up to deliver CASAS e-tests. If you are not already set up, you can transition to e-tests now, even while we're in this quarantine state. And you can go to the CASAS website, to the Going Live checklist, and see how to do that. Our staff can help you as well. So that's, though, a requirement that it can only be given on e-tests. This form, the Agency Remote Testing Agreement, we need one of those per agency, which you can submit online. It covers all remote tests that you might want to give. And for California agencies, it also includes the various EL Civics assessments. There's a separate agency remote testing agreement for California agencies, which is on the California portion of the CASAS website under California remote testing. You'll find it. So this agreement is where we really ask you to read the guidelines carefully, and that we rely on you at the local agency level to assure that the privacy considerations, the test security, the appropriate technology, the test environment of the student, and all of the test administration requirements are being followed. I mean, that has always been the case, that we put out our procedures and guidelines for testing, and we rely on local programs to implement, and it's not different now. But it, I think, will be a little more challenging with remote testing, but in order to allow this, we really need you to do your due diligence and make sure everyone involved is aware of the rules and following them. We have something called a proctor remote testing agreement, and this is the agency's responsibility to have every proctor that's doing remote testing fill this out. Again, they must read the guidelines, agree to follow all the rules, and they have to make sure that they get the student, that is the test taker's agreement, not to get help from others and everything else. So again, this one, there's one form for all, any and all tests that you may do remotely. And we are relying on you to get your proctors to sign this, and that you would just keep it on file with your local assessment policy. When you submit it online, we will have it on file, but we are asking you to keep it on file locally. Now here is the Going Remote checklist, the 10 steps for getting started. Again, the agency has already implemented CASAS e-tests, or if you haven't, you can do it now. You've read these guidelines, and if you're doing more than one approach, you need to read the guidelines for each remote testing approach that you're going to use. Please read them carefully. We really need you to read them carefully. I hope you can understand that this is a huge moment where the whole country is going to be doing this all at once. And we've put out these detailed guidelines, and we really need you to read them carefully as a first step. If everyone were to not read the guidelines and simply call tech support, we will not get through this. So we are beseeching you to please read these guidelines carefully. And then if there's something you don't understand, certainly call us. We are happy to help you. But please, as a first resort, please do read them carefully. Complete that agreement at the agency level, complete the proctor agreement. We do have proctor remote testing training that will be posted on the website in the next couple of days, and there will be separate ones for each approach. We need you to make sure that your proctors have the appropriate equipment, that is computers and webcams, microphones, all those things, and their experience, that they're certified in e-tests, of course. You'll need to determine which of your test takers, which of your students can be test takers in remote testing. As I mentioned earlier, some of them may not be candidates because they simply don't have the required technology. We are aware of that. but whoever can, then you can take advantage of testing them in this way. You're going to need to register testing stations, sometimes for the proctor, sometimes for the test takers. So as I mentioned, that you only need one person to register them now. Then you're going to make sure you've got the right testing sessions in eTests, and be ready with that before you actually start testing. You don't want the student to be waiting while you're getting that set up. We strongly recommend that you try it out with colleagues before you do it with any real students. That's something that the pilot sites were very clear about. It helped them tremendously. So please do some trial runs and then finally go remote. Here is what that remote checklist looks like on the website. And you can see it has some links that will take you right to those documents that are online. One of the things we really want to encourage you to do, it's been a very big part of how programs, the pilot sites have been successful, is that before you actually test, and this can be on the day before or on the same day, depending on how you want to work it out, the proctor or a moderator meets with the test takers to make sure they have the technical requirements, to verify their identity, to scan the room, that is their test environment, and show the test taker how to do that. You know, reassure them that what we're looking for is just to make sure on the testing day there's nobody there to help them, that there are no aides or other kinds of things that might give them answers to the test. We're not, you know, in any way otherwise looking at their environment. It's a chance to go over the test procedures, make them comfortable with the process, including to let them know that they are going to be observed throughout the test. And we know that some of our students are a bit uncomfortable with that, but unfortunately there's no way out of doing that. But if they're aware of it, and that hopefully will help to reduce some of that discomfort. On the day of the test, or that could be the same day if you do these two sessions on the same day, you would connect with the test taker, again, check their identity, again, scan the room, and then administer the test. And there are detailed instructions for that. So, what have we learned from pilot testing? Just a couple of quotes from our pilot sites. They said it worked for us. You can see what they said. So we were encouraged to see that they were successful. In some cases, it took some doing, and they had to really, that's where the practice came in. And they were thankful that they had done that before they actually started. Some of our pilot programs realized that the web conferencing platform that they normally use did not have the features that they needed to do the approach that they were trying to use. So that's something you need to really make sure that before you get going, that the web conferencing platform you're going to use has all those features like remote control, for example. And I would say that one thing we discovered as they tried it out was they came up with many innovative ways to implement remote testing while following our CASAS guidelines. So we very much look forward to you also coming up with innovative ways to do this. And we really want to hear those good ideas from you, as well as we also want to hear any problems that you have, because if we can certainly do our best to address them. So let me just, Janice, anything before we go on to the next steps?
I think there were a few technical questions that might be best answered if agencies are allowed to take the time to read the guidelines document, questions about Chromebooks and iPads being mixed together, the different station registration details. I think it's all pretty clearly covered in there. It's hard to cover it in a 90-minute presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Yes, we are. We did schedule this for an hour and a half. Let's see, we may not need all of that time, but we thought we might take a little more than an hour. So we're getting close to an hour. All right. So as I mentioned, we have created a lot of resources for you, and they are on our website. We have the remote testing guidelines. We have the agency remote testing agreement, the Proctor one. We have the going remote checklist. We also have, as we do with e-tests, we have a quick reference guide that is a shortened version, just step by step, without the detailed or scripted instructions for how to go through the process. We have FAQs. We posted some, I'll show you in a second. We know it's just the beginning. That's a living document that we will keep adding to as we hear from you. And we are about to, the next day or two, post remote testing training for proctors. And that again will be very detailed, and it will be recorded on the website, so proctors will be able to go and take advantage of that. We are also, well, I do want to emphasize that that training is optional. So it's something we think will be helpful, and it's up to your program, state or program, to decide if you want to require it. You of course can. So as far as CASAS is concerned, it is optional, but if a state or local program decides to make it required, that's certainly something you must follow. And we will be also providing a way to take a quiz at the end of the training for each approach, and then get a certificate, which again, as far as CASAS is concerned, is optional, but could be required by a state or local program. I want to mention for the California agencies that are on the webinar, there is a separate California remote testing page on the CASAS website. It's in the California section, and that has all the documents that are specific to California. So I want to go, actually let me just go to this slide first and tell you again that the recording of this webinar is already on the, well, no, it's not, it could not be, but the PowerPoint is already on the CASAS website in the What's New section. It's on the right side of the website. I'm going to show you in a second where it is. And in the News and Updates webinar section, the PowerPoint is already there. The recording of this webinar will be there as soon as we can get it up, probably later today. If you have additional questions about remote testing, we have this email that you can send your questions to. If you have the questions that are technical, please send your question to techsupport@casas.org. And if you would like to participate in pilot testing, because we are still very interested in hearing how it goes with the multiple test takers and with Chromebooks, or if you have other solutions as they come, or as we discover them, or you do, we are continuing our pilot process to keep experimenting with new ways to approach this. So now I'm going to go onto our CASAS website, and here you can see the home page. You can see on the right side, and I don't know if I can make this bigger, but there is a What's New section, and the first thing here is called, it says remote testing. The second one is the updates. I'm just going to click on the updates for a second and show you that we are providing updated information about what's happening with CASAS remote testing. And we try to do this more or less every week, or as soon as something new is happening. So we will keep doing that, and do please keep checking that, that place. But also here under what's new, you can see the first link is to the remote testing page. And this is where you'll see that we have the guidelines for the one-to-one remote control version 2.0, which you can download. We have the guidelines. That is, again, the detailed step-by-step scripted instructions. And this one is for the one-to-one or multiple test takers where the test taker uses a Windows PC. Then we have the quick reference guide, which once you get comfortable and good at the process and you've had some practice doing it, you can use this quick reference guide instead of having the guidelines at your side. Then we have that going remote checklist, which I shared with you earlier. And we have the beginnings of the FAQs. Now down below are the links to the Agency Remote Testing Agreement, which we already have an acronym for, the ARTA. So if I click that link, you will see that it goes to, you can, I'm not going to do it right now, but if you click here, you will get to the form. Well, I can click it, show you that it's in the Moodle format. So it will, you will move through this agency remote testing agreement, and finally at the end you would sign it and submit it. Now back to our remote testing page. Here also is the link to the California version of this agency remote testing agreement. And then here's the link to the Proctor remote testing agreement, which you are going to have your proctors fill out and submit. And you'll be able to make a PDF of that, or copy and paste it and somehow be able to print it if you need to keep it on file. So, and those instructions are available. All right. Let me go back. Again, if you have questions, remote testing at CASAS.org is where you can send them, and we are very happy to answer them. All right, so now I'm going to go back out to the PowerPoint. And at this point, I'm going to ask if there are any questions that we might want to address. I see there's a question. Oh, go ahead, Janice.
No, go ahead, Linda.
Yeah, I saw there's a question. Will there be a student remote testing agreement? No. The way that the student is going to agree to not basically cheat on the test is by agreeing orally. The proctor is going to ask them to agree to those things. I see there's some technical questions that I can't answer. Janice, are there any questions that you think it would be beneficial to put out to the whole group?
I'm going to put you on the spot, and I apologize, but the questions about one-to-many have come up several times, and we refer people to refer to the guidelines and look at the examples that we provided there. Do you have any additional feedback about the process for pilots going forward over the next 2 weeks, or what the future might hold as far as additional expansion? Yes, that slide, please.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, we know that it's limited, that our students don't, the students don't have Windows 10. But that's why the other option for multiple test takers is Chromebooks. That's this option. So it's either with Windows 10 PCs or with Chromebooks. You can test multiple test takers, up to 5. If we can come up with additional ways of doing this, we will certainly make them available as soon as we can. But right now, these are the only 2 ways that you can test multiple test takers. I don't know if I mean the the way to do it is detailed in the guidelines. As I was saying, it does involve these breakout rooms, and I'm sure there'll be various ways that you can work this out other than what we have put in the guidelines. But you know, as you try different approaches or within that, we hope that you will, I mean, we need you to absolutely adhere to the basics of the test security requirements. Okay, well, we can keep the Q&A window open for those of you who keep having, who have additional questions. But I think for now, I'll just say a few things just to thank you for your participation today. We believe that remote testing is a logical extension of what we're doing now more and more with distance learning. We expect, as I'm sure you've realized, that there are going to be reduced budgets in our future. And this is a way that we can possibly continue to both teach and test learners who may not be able to come into our programs, to our agencies in our brick and mortar buildings. So it's a way that we can expand on what we're doing now. And I'm sure that we're going to find many, many new ways to incorporate this as part of what we do every day in our programs. As always, when we innovate, CASAS relies on all of you to work with us, to share what you learn, to let us know what works and what doesn't work. We see this as a very important partnership with the field, and we look forward very much to hearing from you as we embark on this very exciting new chapter in our both instruction and assessment in adult ed. So again, thanks for coming. And this webinar will be recorded. So please let others know who weren't able to attend. We're repeating it tomorrow at 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern. So, and we have we're allowing up to 3,000 participants, so there's no problem with people getting into the webinar. Thank you. This is Linda. I'm going to answer, I see a question from Joe Ferrari about if your meeting software can accommodate more. You know, I don't know what meeting software you are using, but we know that there are some platforms that are particularly designed to do remote testing. And so we can, if you contact us, we would, and if you think your meeting software would qualify for that, we would like to work with you to see if that's possible. For the moment, our limit is 5 people, but as I said, please do contact us if you think that you have software that will that has some features that will allow you to appropriately proctor more than 5. I see there's a question that if there are multiple test takers, Chromebooks is the only option. No, the other option is a PC, Windows PC. I'm answering this question about if the appraisal indicates the early literacy test. There's no reason you could not test the student with the beginning literacy test for ESL. So you'd want to do it one-on-one. It may be a little challenging to get the student comfortable with all of the requirements, but you can use the native language up to the point of giving the test. So it is possible. Tomorrow's agenda is the same as today, but there are trainings for the California programs that are specific. They're online. If not, they'll be posted within the next day. There's a training for EL Civics on COAP remote testing, and there's another training and guidelines also for both for SIT testing. So I would recommend that you go, Sigrun, to the California section of the CASAS California remote testing page.
This is Janice Farah. Sigrun, yes, the answer is it's a very different presentation. It was written by a different team, and it goes into the details of delivering an EL Civics co-op remote assessment, which is very different because what you're doing is you're modifying the assessment to match the technology that the student is capable of using. So that involves a lot of creativity, and we've had a really good response from California agencies who have piloted that, along with the citizenship oral interview. So hopefully you can join us for that. If you'd like to send a question, you can always send that to CIT@casas.org, and we can get back to you directly. And that's it, Linda.
I could just answer this question about if you don't speak the test taker's language. Actually, in the preparation portion of the remote testing process, you could, if you have someone else at your agency who does speak the test taker's language, you could possibly ask them to do that, what we call part A, or the first part of preparation for the test. But otherwise, yes, of course, it's not always possible to speak the test taker's language, but if it is possible, it is a way to get through some of this. Okay, I think we can close now.
Great, thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great afternoon.